What's up, bitches?
Let's talk about crime.
What's up, bitches?
Hello,
Sierra just flipped off her dog because she's been gone all weekend. And when she's gone all over the weekend, we take her dog because she's our grand dog. And
saves me money.
She didn't want to sit with Sierra anymore. And so she got off the bed and Sierra flipped her off.
And now she's staring at you.
And now she's staring at Gigi because she's like, stop talking about me on your podcast. You're welcome. Anyways, what's up, bitches?
Hello.
We are here for just another fun-filled, fantastic podcast episode. Now, this one, did not come from Sierra. Again,
Yeah, I've been sending you a shit ton of them.
No,
though.
you have. However, I have to tell a little story and then we'll get into it. I am an avid reader. I read a lot. And I mean a lot. I have no life outside of, this. And so I have read, so far this year, I've read 23 books. And I mean read. I didn't listen to them. I read them. And some of them are like 500-600 page books. I just read really fast. So I started this book called A Lucky Child. And it is a book about the Holocaust. And I am a fan of learning about the Holocaust and stuff like that. And so I started reading it. Within the first 50 pages, I was like, oh, this is going to be really heavy. It's going to be hard to read. Okay, I can't read it as much as I would normally read a book. And then I was like, but I can't just sit here and twiddle my damn thumbs. So I picked a second book. Well, and my husband said, pick a second genre. And I have so many books that I have a wheel. And I spun the wheel and it said, you need to do a nonfiction book. So he picked it and he picked a book. And I started reading that. And that is a book that is a true crime book. And it is an unsolved true crime to this day. And that's what we're talking about. That's why it's not one of the ones you've sold me, that you've sent me, because this is a book that I'm in, that I'm reading.
I was on a roll too.
Oh, believe me, I'm going back to yours. However, I will tell you that the book that I'm almost done with, I'm not going to lie, I did not finish the book because I needed to get the podcast done, but I did do this. I used this book along with other research factors. So the book that I got a lot of this information from is called The Robison Family, The Good Hart Murders. And so I started reading that one going, oh yeah, no, I definitely want to talk about that, and might as well do it while it's fresh on my brain, because that's kind of where I'm at with it, where I have a list of ones that that Sierra has sent me that I absolutely will be doing as well. It's just when I'm reading a nonfiction.
We should have like our own little file that says Sierra's picks.
Yeah, we should. But this way, I like to read books, but it's not very often that I have true crime nonfiction, like books that murders that I can talk about on this show. Most of my nonfiction have to do with serial killers. So that's what we're talking about today. Today, we are talking about the Robison family murders. So this happened in June 1968 in Good Hart, Michigan. The Robison family is found murdered, and this is still unsolved today. They say it's unsolved, but just fucking buckle your seatbelts, because I'm going to tell you right now.
Because it sounds like it's going to be one that's could be solved, but the people don't want to do their job.
No,
or
it's
not
more
enough evidence.
No, it's more like I will say this. It's more like some people who live in this area who were around when this happened, they legitimately have said, like, we're going to just consider it case closed. Okay. And there's a reason, but I'd like to tell the story first. So we're going to get into it. So a little background, the Robisons. The Robisons were a family of 6. It was Richard Robison, who was the father of the family. Shirley Robison is the mother. Richard Jr., Gary, Randall, and Susan. So it's Richard and Shirley, and they have 4 children. So it's a family of 6. Randy. That's what I think of Randy.
Still.
Now, Richard and Shirley, they were married in 1947, and Richard founded and operated an advertisement agency called R.C. Robison and Associates. And his little advertisement agency ends up coming into like fruition, man. They start becoming fairly wealthy, and they have quite a bit of money, And they're living a pretty lavish lifestyle. So much so that like they do happen to have their own private plane. And they do live in a very prominent Detroit neighborhood where their children grow up in an extremely safe and wealthy environment. They go to really good schools, all the things. And this is all based off of literally Richard, because Richard is the only one that works. Shirley is a homemaker. By 1968, Richard Jr. is attending Eastern Michigan University. Gary is a student at Southland Lathrop High School. Randall is in middle school, and Susan is in the first grade. So this is the year 1968. This is what they're all doing. Now, the family was considered devout Lutherans, and they attended church regularly. And the family had planned on spending their entire summer of 1968 at a cabin that they had recently purchased. Actually, I don't think it was recently. At a cabin that they had purchased. And this cabin was located at the Blisswood Resort in Good Hart, Michigan. And this was actually a home that was kind of in a secluded spot surrounded by trees. It was kind of looked like a little log cabin, kind of. Well, not little, because their whole family was there. But it was like a one-level log cabin surrounded by trees. But it was built by a family who built a bunch of basically cabins, and then they ended up selling them to people. And they can come out and go to this area in the summertime, I guess. Now, they pack up their cars, both of their cars, because they're a family of six. Unless they had a big ass van, you got to pack both cars up. So they pack up both of their cars, get ready to go, spend the whole entire summer in this area. Now, once they're there, they do the normal stuff. There's like a beach there. There's things that they can do. They're doing all these things. Well, Richard actually ends up meeting up with this man named Monty Bliss, who is the caretaker of the homes. So basically, in the off season when nobody's there, Monty is there to make sure that the homes, aren't flooding or aren't broken into, that nobody's squatting. So he's there to kind of check on the homes throughout the time when the owners aren't living there or when somebody isn't there. And Monty is he is the son of the man who actually created the Blisswood Resort. So his father is the one, but he's an adult and he takes care of these things. Richard ends up meeting up with Monty because Monty's son was in a car accident and died. And the day after this news had spread, Richard shows up to pay his, respects, to tell him that he was sorry to hear that his son had passed and to talk to him for a few minutes, and then tells him, hey, by the way, Monty, my family and I are actually going to be leaving, but we're going to be heading just out of town for a couple weeks, maybe 2 to 3 weeks. And we'll be back by July, though. So this is in June. He's talking to him in June and telling him, like, we're going to be gone for a little bit, but we'll be back. We have some things to do. Well, what the rumor about it is that they were actually going to go to Kentucky and Florida because they were looking at purchasing homes or property. That's how much, like, they were wealthy. Okay. So he gives Monty a key. And he tells Monty, like, hey, I'm going to give you the key to the house just in case you need to get into the house for any reason. Here's the key, because I'm assuming that when they got there, they probably met up with Monty and was like, oh, yeah, because Monty probably has the keys normally when they're not there. Now, on June 25th, 1968, Richard calls his personal banker, Frank, and he tells Frank, they're talking about business things. He's telling Frank, like, listen, I'm expecting a very large chunk of money that's going to be coming in. I want to make sure that money has come in. It's like the upwards of $200,000. It needs to be in the bank. I want to make sure that it got put in the bank. Only he is told by Frank that there's no such deposit. The $200,000 is not in his bank. Neither has a bunch of other deposits. And also, there has been some really weird shit going on with his business account. And as it sits, he currently only has $15,000 in his business bank account, which blows his fucking top because that's not how much he's supposed to have. And he knows that. So he's very upset. So he ends up hanging up with his banker and he calls his office and he talks to his receptionist at the office and he tells her, I want to talk to Joseph Scalero III now, because Joseph Scalero III, he is the only employee that would have access to these bank accounts. So Richard already knows that if the bank deposits are not being brought into the bank, because this is before we had electronic shit, right? So this is like,
it makes me think of It's a Wonderful Life.
It's a Wonderful Life, where he loses $8,000. So he's sitting there going, if Joseph did not bring these to the bank, where the fuck is my money? And also, why do I only have $15,000 in my business bank account? He ends up talking to Joseph. Now, phone records do end up actually showing that he attempted to call Joseph 17 times. So they did talk at one point, but he tried to call him like 16 more times after they talked and did not get a hold of him. Now, the final sighting of Richard and his boys was actually also on June 25th, 1968, by two men who were working on trimming the trees on their property. They had showed up, they had struck a deal, they were getting paid, and they actually said that on the 25th, Richard had come out to pay them. Like, he came out, talked to them, paid them money for what they were doing, and they were coming back on the 26th to finish the job. And they said that they saw the boys kind of coming in and out of the house, and it was like a normal day. They came back on the 26th, and they said the cars were still there. The curtains were drawn. It didn't look like, it just kind of looked like there was a chance that really nobody was home. But everybody who had talked to him knew that he was planning on leaving on the 25th with his family to go on to Kentucky and Florida. And their rumor was that he was actually meeting up with a business somebody he knew through business who has a private plane, and the family was going to go on this private plane. So some of the people in the area actually thought that the reason their cars were still there is because they got picked up by somebody and then brought to like this private airport. So in July of 1968, so this is like, I don't know, like almost a month later, there is a really awful smell that is in the air of this area. And it's especially noticeable when the wind is blowing. And there's a woman who's she's having an outdoor kind of party, and the smell in the air gets so bad that they end up like moving inside the house and closing the windows, which again, no air conditioning a lot of the times. So they're like suffering. So she ends up going to Monty, and she's like, I don't know what that smell is, but it literally ruined my party last night. Something has to be done. We need to figure out where it's coming from. And they start to really notice that the smell kind of comes from the area of where the Robison's cabin is. And so Monty's like, yeah, no problem. He also is under the impression that there's a chance that the Robisons are not there. And so he's like, I'll go check it out. He actually thinks, as he's smelling, because he can smell the smell, he thinks it's probably a dead raccoon or something in like their home area, whether it died in front of the house, whether it died under the house. So he brought shovels and shit with him so that he could get rid of whatever the smell was. So he shows up to the property, notices that the Robison's cars are both parked there, but they hadn't moved in quite some time. And so he's like, well, I guess I'm just going to go ahead and knock, because if their cars are here, maybe they're here. So he knocks on the door. They do not answer. So he then uses his key to unlock the door. Well, when he goes to push the door open, he notices that he can't get the door open because there's a latch on the inside that you would lock the door from the inside, and it's latched. So he's unable to get in that way. So he shuts the door, goes around to the back, and he notices that the back door is locked, and there's a padlock on the back door that is also locked. So he's sitting there going, well, this is really strange, because they locked their whole entire house, but how did they lock the latch while they were in there while they left? So then he's got a guy that is one of his workers with me. He tells me, he says, go get some tools. I need to get in, and see if I can figure out what this smell is. So he opens up he gets tools together. I'm not really quite understanding. I believe in the book, it's hard to understand. I believe he used tools to basically take the door frame off. And then because he took the door frame off, he was able to reach in and lift the latch up right through the door frame. Because it's like I think of like when you have
an up and down latch.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like the chain. No. Just fucking break it.
No, it's like an up and down latch, like what you see on like gates and stuff, where you like have to, the latch like comes down. So he ends up, and it's something that his father actually had created for all the homes to protect people in their homes. So he's able to get the latch up, and he opens the door. So once he enters the home, he discovers a body on the ground in the living room. So the living room was when you walk in the door, the living room was to the left. And I know this because they have a floor plan of the house. That's how I know this. So you walk in, living room's to the left, and he sees a body on the floor. He knows it's a body because what he sees is 2 pairs of legs sticking out from underneath a plaid blanket. So that's what he sees. Within moments, he realizes that is the body of 40-year-old Shirley Robison. Like, that is Shirley. So he looks to the guy that's with him, and the guy's like, we need to call the cops. And he said, I agree. So they back out of the house. They go and they contact the police, and then they go back to the Robison's house and they just wait. Now the police officers show up, and they question him, obviously, like, what were you doing here? And he's like, I'm a caretaker for this area. They were supposed to be out of town. This weird smell's been coming from the house. They obviously know now what the smell is, especially because this is TMI, but the house, there's some pictures in the book, is covered with dead flies and live flies and maggots because these people were decomposing in this house, right? And there is a picture actually that shows the suitcases from the family. And when I first looked at the picture, I was like, what the, like, are there rose petals on the ground? Like, I didn't get it. And then when I looked closer, it's all flies. I'll show you the picture. I'll show it to you. But it is fucking gnarly, first of all. Also, for anybody who doesn't like bumpy things, don't look at it because it really fucking grossed me out. And that bumpy shit bothers me. And it looks bumpy because it's fucking flies. It's really fucking gross. Anyways, so they see that. They talk to the cops. He explains who he is. The cops are like, okay, well, we're going to take a look. So the police go in. They enter the home. They also notice as soon as they walk in that it's the fucking most awful smell. So they actually put on masks, like respirator masks, so they can go into this house. And there's pictures of them. This book's cool because it has pictures of the crime scene. Not the people, but like the cops and shit. And you can see them with their masks on and shit. So they enter the home. They, of course, find Shirley. Now, Shirley is obviously still on the floor. She has the blanket still covering her. So they go over and they find that she is lying on her stomach. Her legs are spread open, but her feet are pointed in towards each other. They notice that her lime-colored dress is pulled all the way up to her waist. Her undergarments are around her ankles, and they notice that they had been cut. Like, she had a garter, and it was cut in half. They also noticed that she had one shoe on, which was a plain beige heel, and the other plain beige heel was on a couch. And they said it really looks like maybe somebody like took it and like just tossed it. Like maybe she was in the middle of taking her shoes off or something when that happened or whatever. Police's first impression when they see her is that they believe she has been raped, but they will wait for the autopsy to tell them. But all indicators are that she has been raped. So they continue on through the house. They start walking down the hallway and they come to a pile of bodies, literally like piled on top of each other. And on the very bottom of this pile is 42-year-old Richard Robison. So he's on the bottom and he is on his stomach and his cheek is sitting on the furnace register. Then face down on top of Richard, but backwards, is Randall Robison, who was 12 years old. His legs are actually on top of his dad's shoulders and his face is like where his dad's legs are. So he's like backwards from his dad. And then there's like this narrow space between the two bodies. And that is where they find the body of 7-year-old Susan Robison, who is literally shoved between the wall and the bodies of her brother and dad. Now the police continue to go through the home and they end up running into Richard Jr., who is 19 years old. He is also deceased and he is lying on his stomach with his arms twisted awkwardly. And his body is halfway between the hallway and the back bedroom of the home. So they continue on and they end up finding Gary Robison, who is 17 years old. He's lying on his back. His right arm is extended like he was trying to reach out for something. And he has a suit jacket on, but it's all bunched up around his shoulders. So they now realize that every single family member of the Robison family is dead and has been dead for quite some time. So the investigators continue their investigation, and here are some of the things that they find in the home. They find a bloody claw hammer, pools of blood everywhere, drag marks on the floor, bloody footprint. They also noticed that all of the curtains had been closed in the cottage and all of the doors had been locked. So they were already kind of like, so whoever did this purposely came into this home, killed this family, and then closed up the house to make it look like the family was not there because the family was supposed to be gone. So this is definitely something sketchy. They also find spent shell casings from a 22 caliber and a 25 caliber weapon. They also see at the back of the house in one of the windows, there are bullet holes in the back of a window that were actually covered with a piece of cardboard that they believe the killer covered to try to like disguise or hide the bullet holes. And then they see that there's also a note that is written on a paper towel that they did not realize was there when they first got to the home. And it was taped on the front door. It's like it looks like it's a paper towel. And on it was written, "We will be back, 710 Robison." So I think that was Richard's way of telling Monty or anybody who came to the house, we're not here, but we'll be back July 10th. This is after July 10th, by the way, that they found this. But anybody who would have pulled up or gone to the house at any time from June 25th until now would have thought they were just gone. All of the Robison family members had been shot, and Susan had been bludgeoned Susan, the little girl, had been bludgeoned with the claw hammer. Now, investigators believe that there was only one shooter who maybe possibly and most likely used two guns. And the reason they say that was because they only found one footprint in the whole entire scene. And there was a lot of blood. Now, due to the fact that there was a lot of heat going on, it's July, it's hot, the bodies decomposed much faster than they normally would because it's like a fucking sauna in there. And so investigators have to work around the fact that a lot of the evidence they could have gotten had they found the bodies earlier is going to be gone. And never mind the fact that, again, they have maggots and larvae and flies, dead and alive, all over this house. So investigators start to dig into the family. Specifically, they dig into Richard because, well, he pretty much is the main source. I mean, he's their only source of income, and that's just where you would start. Well, as they start talking to different people, they actually find out that some people really liked him, and they thought he was just like the nicest guy. Then there were other people who thought he was too hard, he was harsh, he was tough. Nobody ever said anything bad, like he wasn't abusive or nothing like that. He was strict with his kids. Then he talks to the pastor of his church, of Richard's church. And he said, the pastor says, he was a good guy. However, I would describe him as having like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde personality. And he was saying what he meant by that was, if Richard liked you, he would do anything over, under, and around the moon to help you. He would absolutely always help you. If he did not like you, he would tell you to fuck yourself. Not in those words, because he didn't talk like that. But my point is, he would have no desire to help you. And he probably, what it sounded like is he really wished that you would fail at whatever it is that you wanted. Like he didn't like you, you're dead. You're dead to him. He doesn't care. If he liked you, he'd help you with anything you needed. So it was also strange that as they're doing some more research, they are finding, when they do the autopsies, that Richard is wearing a St. Christopher medal around his neck. And this St. Christopher medal has an inscription on it. The inscription says, "Richard, to my chosen son and heir, God bless you, Robert." His father's name is not Robert. Okay, so that's not his father. This is a religious thing. Now, this is strange to them because St. Christopher medals, I know Sierra knows about them, or at least she should, because we all got one. Well, we all turned 16, all at different times in our life, of course. But every person in our family has gotten a St. Christopher medal from my parents because my parents are Catholic. And St. Christopher is what you would use to protect somebody from travel. He is a patron of travelers and he offers protection. And so when all of us turned 16 in the many different times of the year that we did, all of us were given a St. Christopher, and I think everybody's St. Christopher was given in a visor clip. So you've got the St. Christopher medal on your visor, or maybe a couple of us got keychains. But it was weird to them that he was wearing, not that he was wearing it, but the fact that he was wearing it, and he was a devout Lutheran, which is not Catholic. So they thought it was a little strange because they're like, that's a little weird. And never mind the fact that Robert is not your father. So none of this makes sense. Then they continue to search on his life, and they go to his office, and they actually find a letter in his office. And the letter is actually is written to somebody named Robert. And I'm saying Robert. Here's why I'm saying this. His name is spelled Roebert. And the reason I'm saying Robert is because they had questioned Richard's father and Richard's mother-in-law about, do we know like where they could have been? Do we know people they could have been talking to? The mother said, well, I know there was a guy that they were supposed to be meeting with, but I can't remember what the guy's name was. But it was a strange name. She said it was a very peculiar name, but I can't remember the name. So I don't know, but I definitely know that they had plans to meet with him. And then they talked to his father, to Richard's father, and Richard's father said, oh yeah, there was a guy they were supposed to meet. And they said, do you remember his name? He said, hell yeah, I remember his name. It was weird as hell. It was Robert. So it can't be Robert, because that's not a weird name.
Right.
So it's got to be like Robert. That's why I'm calling Robert. Anyway, so this is a letter to Robert. And it says, it's a long letter. I'm not reading the whole thing. I'm just reading pieces of it. It says, I'm most honored and pleased with the message given me by Steamboat Joe this morning. I have it where we decided and have instructed Joe not to allow me to drop my wallet. Also, if something should happen to me, to take the entire wallet and pass it up where the motor people would know what to do with it. Then the letter goes on to talk about how he was giving car allowances to 2 of his staff members, like just kind of like just telling him what the shit he was doing. But then the letter ends with I thank God for you, Father, your son always, Richard. So again, it's got to be, in my opinion, it's got to be like a religious relationship. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. That's what I think of, because I don't know what else it would be. Now, a handwriting expert looks at this letter and says, yep, that's absolutely Richard's. That's verifying that is Richard's handwriting. He did write this letter. So the police begin to start looking at all the angles. They don't ever find who this Robert guy is, by the way. So they never find out who the Robert guy is because they don't have a last name. They just know his first name. So they don't know who Robert is. They just start talking to all the people. They talk to all the family members. They talk to all the business partners. And they interview anybody and everybody they could, including everybody who lived in the Good Hart area as well, who may have had contact. All of the people who lived in Good Hart, they were all eliminated as suspects relatively quickly because it was clear they had nothing to do with it. What they did know is that the murders were premeditated, and they knew that the murders were committed most likely by one person. And they also knew that whoever this person was most likely knew at least one of the family members, due to the no forced entry, first of all, and the fact that the person was able to know where they lived, know where their cottage was because it was in a secluded area. They also had discovered that Shirley had not actually been raped, so she was not raped. But they think that her body was posed like that to allude to this fact, because the other thing was they think whoever murdered the family was trying to make it look like a robbery, because the only thing, a rape and robbery, because the way her body was, and she was missing her ring, a high carat ring, and nobody else was missing anything else. So they were like, oh, maybe they were trying to make it look like a rape and robbery. So by the second week of the investigation, after doing all this fucking research, they have a prime suspect. This is 30-year-old Joseph Scalero III. Do you remember Joseph? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's their prime suspect. So Joseph is a vet of the Army Security Agency. He graduated from Harvard, and he had worked for Robison since 1965. So he'd been working for him for 3 years. They also knew that he had visited the cottage on some date prior to the murders. He had actually gone out and been around the family. They talked to him, and he said, I did talk to my boss on multiple occasions prior to the murder. He also says, yes, he called me on the day of the murder, or the day that they assumed they were murdered. And I did talk to him a couple of different times on that day. And every time I talked to him, we were talking about missing checks and missing deposits. And I talked to him a bunch of times because, they're telling him we have 17 phone calls being made to you.
Right.
And he's saying, yeah, I know. I talked to him a bunch of times, and we talked about it, and we were trying to figure it out. So they also talked to Richard's receptionist, who says, well, that's strange, because Joe actually left the office shortly after receiving her first phone call from Mr. Robison at 10:30 in the morning. So he got off the phone with Mr. Robison and abruptly grabbed his shit and left. Even though he's telling the police that he talked to him a bunch of times. Nobody saw or heard from Joseph between 10:30 a.m. and 11 p.m. of that day, which happens to be the same day they were murdered. And they only know it was 11 p.m. because that's when he returned home. Nobody knows where he was. Nobody can verify his location. So they actually talked to him multiple times about his time gap of where he was. And he has an alibi. And that didn't work out. So he had like another alibi. And they're like, yep, that also doesn't ring true. So he gave them a couple different alibis. And they all basically were debunked. All right. Now they also found a pair of boots in his belongings, in Joseph's belongings, that actually matched exactly to the boot print that was found in the Robisons' home. However, they couldn't verify that these boots have actually ever been worn, so they weren't able to say, oh, that's definitely his boot. Don't get
Bro, it's the middle of summer. You can't fucking figure out if there's sweat particles in that shit.
Well, it's the 60s. I don't think they had that.
Still.
They also found that he had initiated a large increase in his salary without Richard's knowledge. So he gave himself a big fat ass raise and didn't even tell Richard about it. They also found that he owned a 22 and 25 caliber weapons. So when these facts were brought to him and they were like, listen, guy, you have no alibi. We know he was pissed at you. We know you gave yourself a raise. We know he was losing money because of you. We know that you own the weapons that were literally used to kill this family, like the caliber of weapons. We also found some boots that happened to exactly match the bloody blueprint that we found. What do you got to say for yourself? He says, oh, yeah. Well, you see, I actually gave one of those guns that you're telling me about. I gave one of those to Richard. And the other gun, I actually gave that to somebody else way prior before these murders. So then they're able to actually track down one of the guns that he supposedly gave away. And they did use ballistics to rule out that weapon had been used. So that specific weapon had not been used. Joe also took 2 polygraphs. He failed both of them. He took a third one and it was deemed inconclusive. They also said that during the polygraphs, he was giving answers that would have been deliberately trying to fuck the machine up. Like fuck up the readings, which is why it was inconclusive. Because they said like he was deliberately giving answers that we would tell him like, you can't answer like that, answer it again. But he was deliberately doing it to where it would mess with the polygraph. So in November of 1969, they actually found shell casings at a firing range. This firing range happened to be owned by Joe's father-in-law. And these shell casings were forensically linked to match exactly to the casings found at the murder scene. Now, they also found that Joe's pistol was exactly the same make and model of the gun that was used to kill the Robisons. However, they could not actually they couldn't actually trace the actual gun because they didn't know where it was, right? So they weren't able to actually trace that gun to the murders. Now, Joe's wife also was interviewed about his guns, and she had said, oh, no, I know he owned those guns because I was there when he bought them from my father at the firing range. Okay, so this is where we're at. So police at this point are like, okay, we got enough evidence. We're going to fucking charge him with murder. Period, point blank. There is way too many coincidences for this shit to not be real. So on December 17th, 1969, they present 700 pages worth of a case report to the prosecution because, you have to if you're going to put charges on somebody, you have to go to a prosecutor and the prosecutor has to actually agree to press charges, right? That's how it works. As they're looking, this 700 pages said, we have all this circumstantial evidence that points that he is it. We also can show you that he had means, motive, and opportunity, which are literally the things you need to prove murder. Means, motive, opportunity, and some sort of evidence, circumstantial or not, a lot of people have gone away for circumstantial evidence. The prosecuting attorneys are like reading over it again. Maybe they actually didn't, because they end up ruling that there is insufficient evidence to charge him. They said that while the ballistics match forensically from the fucking fire range where the shell casings were found that happened to be owned by Joseph's father-in-law, and it just so happens that he owned the same guns and he did actually use the firing range, we had no fucking gun. Also, there were no fingerprints, so insufficient evidence. And they decided they were not going to charge him. So they did not charge him with murder. Now, within 4 months of the Robison's family's death, Joe took over Richard's company. He bought it from Richard's estate. So he literally gained all this shit off of his death. Then in spring of 1969, the cottage that the family was murdered in was demolished because they deemed it unlivable. I totally agree with that. I think that was the best case scenario. And now in 1973, so we're 4 years in, there's a new chief prosecutor. And this new chief prosecutor takes a good look at the information. He says, you know what? Go ahead and hand me that 700-page case report that you brought up about Joe. And I'm going to just kind of go through it. And I'm going to tell you if maybe we need to revisit this. So he goes through all of the evidence. He goes through all of the things that they said. And he comes out and says, I will absolutely be charging him with murder. So he comes out and says, we will be charging. And he says it publicly, like in a press conference. We will be charging Joseph Joseph Scarello III with the murder of the Robison family. That's what he's doing. So on March 8th, 1973, Joseph Scarello III commits suicide by shooting himself in the head in his office. And he actually had 2 typed notes, suicide notes. One of his suicide notes was attached to his office door, on the outside of his office door, and it was addressed to his mother. And it literally told her not to come in the office. Like literally told her, do not come in here. The second one was found with his body, and it was also addressed to his mother. And he acknowledged his role in doing some forgery and fraudulent activities, but he did actually end it with a handwritten denial of killing the Robison family. So the letter specifically says, Mother, where do I start? I am a liar, cheat, phony. Any check that any of the people have with your signature isn't any good because I forged your name to it to get them off my back. I owe everybody you can think of. I have made poor investments and in some cases, no investments at all. I love you dearly, but living only causes you more heartache. I just can't help myself. Please understand. Love, Joe. P.S. I had nothing to do with the Robisons. I'm a cheat, but not a murderer, Joe. And he also, by the way, his body was found by 2 men who came into his office because he owed them $750 and they were there to collect on the debt. And they found his body. So after Joe's death, the case basically takes a back seat because so many people are convinced that Joe was the one that did it that they're almost like, fuck it, it's not even worth it to keep it open because we can't even press charges because he's dead. Now, one of the detectives who had worked on the case in 2008 came out and said, you know, I actually still to this day think that he's responsible. He said, I told him back in the day when we were investigating him, he said, I looked at him and said, and I quote, you killed the Robisons, and if you didn't, then you know who pulled the trigger. That's how confident the police officers were that he had something to do with their murder. So as it sits today, the case has never been solved. People have now come out and said, let's just call it case closed because we know who the fuck did it, but we can't do anything about it because he's dead. So what do you think?
I mean, I think it was him.
I do too.
The only other thing that I could think of is the
Robert.
Yeah.
I thought Robert, actually, when I was reading the book, my initial instinct was, well, what the fuck is this Robert guy doing? Like, that was my initial instinct. And then the more that I read about Joseph, I was like, I mean, I could see it because he's a little skeezy. And he's got the expertise, and he would absolutely not, like, they would open the door to him if he were to show up at the cottage because he was literally Richard's right-hand man in his own business. But the fact that they had so much evidence that pointed to Joseph,
but yet they still said
but
no.
they didn't do anything. The only thing that I question, this is the only thing that I question. All of the evidence points to him. Dead serious, all the evidence points to him. But if he's committing suicide, why would he take the time to say, I did not do it? Genuinely. He's already admitting to his mom that he's a piece of shit in all aspects of it. He already is telling her that he has done all this bad stuff. Why would he take the time to write down, P.S., by the way, I did not kill the Robisons? Why? So there's 2 things that come to my brain. Because it was handwritten, there's a part of me that wonders if somebody wrote it, right?
That was my first
like if
thought.
somebody who came, like maybe.
Well, did they ever?
They didn't do any handwriting analysis or whatever. But in my brain, I'm sitting there going, why would he have handwritten that? Because everything else was typed. So why would you handwrite it? So my thought is that he absolutely 100% never put that. And somebody came in after he died and realized, oh, this is a good time to, change the narrative of him being a suspect. But why would you kill yourself 4 months, like not 4 months? Why would you kill yourself so quickly after being told that you're going to get arrested for murder if you didn't do it? And you can't tell me it's because you fucking feel like shit because you stole people's money. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could, to be fair. I mean, I guess if you're really fraudulent, you probably could. But I mean, it's just again, all the things add up, and it's like very convenient timing. Just like all of his, not the clues, but all the evidence was very conveniently fit with him. Like, too many conveniences there's no such thing as that many conveniences, I don't think. I mean, not conveniences. Why the fuck am I saying that? I don't even know what I'm trying to say. Coincidences. When you have that many coincidences, it's not a fucking coincidence. Not a convenient. Why the fuck did I say that? I need to go to jail. Anyways, I don't know what the fuck. But yeah, so to me, way too many coincidences in the murder. Way too many coincidences in the fact that he fucking killed himself not very long after being told, oh, by the way, we're arresting you for murder. And they didn't tell him. They just said it publicly. And then he was like, oh, shit. And then again, the final thing is the fact that you typed out 2 suicide notes, but then hand wrote the part about the Robisons. That seems strange to me. Strange as shit. Like I said, it does make me wonder if before they called in, like, oh, I don't know, the cops to come in and like get his body, if like maybe somebody who was his secretary or somebody who worked with him went on and put that in there.
Maybe.
I don't know. It's very strange.
Watch it be the guy who had the key to the house.
Money. I don't think so. The thing about Good Hart is it's a really small town, and it's North Michigan. And even to this day, here's what's crazy. It still haunts this town. This murder haunts this town because also it's like the only murder I think there was one other gun violence thing that happened in this town ever. So it's the only time that something terrible has happened, and it's like the most horrific fucking thing you could think of. And it affected the whole town, and it still affects them. Like I said, they're asking the public and they're asking people, like, can we just call it closed? We all know who did it. We all know it was Joseph. We all said it. Once they came out with it, the police said it. It was just whoever, those 2 people, those 2 prosecuting attorneys wouldn't do it. Then there's that part, because I'm still in like Epstein land. Did like Joseph pay off the fucking prosecuting attorneys and be like, just look the other way, bro? Like, I don't fucking know. So I just sit there and that's why I thought I wanted to do this episode, because I was like, it's very strange. You're never going to get it solved. There will never be a way to solve this. So the only thing you can do is say that they let the only suspect, the main suspect, the person who literally did it, because all the evidence points to him, they let him go and gave him the opportunity to kill himself instead of serve jail time for killing a whole entire family. That is the story of the Robison family murders. So if you like what you hear, if you like the things that we talk about, which is a lot of times murder, sometimes spooky shit, sometimes just unsolved crimes that may not have to do with murder. Although I don't think we've actually done one yet that doesn't have to do with murder. I'm not going to lie. So if you like that stuff, make sure you're following us. And if you think you know somebody who will like this, share us with them. We love it when we get likes and shares. And I love it when I get comments. And I love it when I get emails. And it's just great. Tell us if you want to tell us what you think. This is unsolved. It's always gonna be unsolved. Do you think it was Joseph as well, or are we just like totally off base and have no idea what we're talking about? Which I doubt, because we solved the yogurt shop murders. Just so you know, if you haven't been listening long enough, just go back and listen to Yogurt Shop Murders. It came out before they solved it, and Sierra fucking nailed that shit right on its head. Actually, we've done that with a couple. I'm not gonna lie. We're very.
I'm starting to think there's a listener out there
I
that's
do
part
too.
of like the FBI.
Either
or
that,
some
or
shit.
I mean, I don't know. I think
Which,
Sierra.
if that's the case, give me a fucking job.
I
I'll
was gonna
solve
say,
the cold
I think
cases.
Sierra and
Shit.
I need to get into cold case. Fucking,
I've
damn,
already
so
said.
Fun.
I've already said. I feel like every police department needs somebody that is not actually trained in the police field.
Yep.
And is just like a true crime junkie, because hello. Look at the fucking Netflix one with the cats.
Mm-hmm.
It was not, I'm not trying to be a dick, but it was not the police that solved that. It was people submitting things to the police. And once they finally listened, they fucking caught the guy after he killed somebody.
Well, and part of the reason that works that way is because in the police department, they have they have multiple things they're doing, but also they have laws they have to follow.
Well, and they also have things that they...
And there's specific ways they look at things, and there's specific ways they do things. And when and if
it's a case that they've seen kind of before, then they'll be like, okay, what did we do that time, you know?
So it's like they have that. And when you're a crime junkie or when you're somebody who is an internet detective, you actually can take more time to study and look at things. And one of the things that helped in that specific Netflix documentary that you were talking about is they were able to, the internet detectives started talking about, look at the pictures that he's posting, screenshots of videos, and they were zooming in on the outlets that were on his wall, because the outlets on his wall were not United States American outlets. And so they immediately knew this isn't even happening in the United States. So where could it possibly be? So then they started taking the outlets and started Googling to try to find out what countries had this type of outlet. And then they were able to narrow it down. Like, that's how they did it. Whereas police officers are just not spending that much time doing it. They don't have the time to do it. They don't have the time or the manpower. So sometimes, correct, cold cases, I think there should be a committee. I think every county should have a committee of 2 or 3 people that are internet detective crime junkies. Let them read through all the files. Let them do all the things they need to do and see if they can come. Or even
the cold case ones.
That's what I'm talking about. Put them in a room. Let them start with a cold case and see if they can come up with anything different than what
I can guarantee you right now. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I can probably solve at least a couple. And I'm not saying necessarily.
You and your dad too.
The thing
your
is,
dad does the same
I'm not
thing.
even necessarily saying solve. Like, I could be like, oh, it was so and so. But like for the yogurt shop murders, I didn't say it was a specific person.
No.
What I said is, why are they not using genealogy like they did with the Brian Koberger case?
Yep.
Lo and behold, 2 weeks later,
they
announced that they were going to do that, and then they did, and then they found a fucking serial killer who was linked to it.
Yep, by his genealogy, or by DNA genealogy, and he was already dead, so they can't do anything about it.
But again, I didn't say I knew who it was, but I'm saying that even just the idea, especially with the technology that we have now.
Dude, I'm not even playing. I would do that shit for free. If they were to come out and be like, hey, we're looking for volunteers to help solve cold cases,
dude, I'd quit. I'd fucking
done.
I'd look at my boss and be like, I'm taking the month off. I'm doing this.
Done. Like, I'll be there. Hand me the files. Anyways, we're definitely not internet detectives, and we most definitely.
However, if one of our followers is an FBI agent, just send us a real quick wink email, and we'll know
give
to
us
keep
just
helping
a
you out.
Okay.
I don't even want the money.
No, I do this shit for free. I don't even want the kudos. I actually like the fact that I hide behind a microphone.
Whoa.
I don't want the kudos.
I would appreciate the kudos.
No, thank you. I would like
Could you imagine if it was like all over the internet, crime bitches solves cold cases? I'm just throwing that out there.
I mean, sure. I don't want my face and my real name.
Our face isn't out there right now.
I understand that. That's why I'm saying, I like hiding behind this shit and just doing this shit, because guess what? That is how I work. I like to hide behind. I'm a very introverted person. You'll never see me in public, ever. Anyways, once again, thank you so much for listening to us talk about the Robison family murders, the family who were killed on their summer vacation in Good Hart, Michigan.
By Joseph,
who died by suicide. Anyways, until next week. Catch you on the flip side, bitches.
Bye, bitches.